Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for being here. We are really honored to welcome this panel today. This is the launch of Women on the Move by the European Commission. And my name is Sarah Brunet. I'm here on behalf of Lucia Recalde, who is the head of the media unit. So this is the first edition of Women on the Move, and we are very, very honored to have this first edition with Collectif 50/50. So I will give the floor to Melissa Silverstein. Thank you very much. And thank you also to these four great speakers for being here. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks everybody for being here. There's a lot of people who've been working on this, most particularly this woman down front, Delphine Bess from Collectif 50/50. She's been a colleague since literally the day after the festival ended last year to try to work on this issue. So I'm very honored to be a part of this work. So we have a great conversation that's going to happen right now, but we just wanted to go through a couple of statistics first to start off about what it's looked like. So 1 year ago, we were all here, and Can signed the pledge, and then the question was, what are these numbers going to look like, and how are we going to take these numbers and propel the next level for gender parity in this conversation? A couple of overviews that I just want to give you. 47 festivals have signed across the globe except for Asia. So anyone who is affiliated with an Asian festival, we'd love to talk with you. And we just had our first African festival announced, Durban, which is coming up in July, I believe. So we're super excited about that. And just like this week, Ireland, Women in Film Ireland organized a bunch of festivals in Ireland to sign. So it's continuing to go across the globe. As I mentioned, the whole objective of this is about transparency and accountability. And so here we go, continuing. List of festivals, a bunch in France. Thank you, France. And this is all available on the Collectif 50/50 by 2020 website, and we can get you that address. So is anyone who signed the pledge from another festival in the room? Raise your hands. All right. Congratulations. Thank you all for being a part of this. And by continent, here we go. And so the whole objective is to really understand how people get into festivals and how things get selected. So as you can see, we have 38% of artistic directors that are female at all the 47 festivals. And then 56% women in selection committees, and then 42% on board of directors. Now, everybody's festival is different. Everybody has different interactions with their selection committees. Some do more, some do less. Then you have, people's boards of directors are also very different, whether it's a board that meets about policy and oversight versus being an advisory board. So those are the things, of course, we can't distinguish. And then we just wanted to kind of take a look at the major festivals. And so what happens is that the amount of artistic directors of females decreases by a tremendous amount. Yes, we still have 50% of women in selection committees, and yet we have less females on board of directors. So that is the overview of the stats. So we start with that. So I wanted to introduce the great conversation and the panelists that are in front of me right now who have given their time, and all these people have signed the pledge. So on that end over there, Orwa Nairobi, he's the artistic director of IDFA, documentary festival, the largest in the world. I'm pretty sure that is true. One of the largest in the world. Joanna Vicente is the co-director of the Toronto International Film Festival. Mariette Reisenbeck is the co-head of the Berlinale. Trisha Tuttle is the artistic director of the BFI London Film Festival. And Michael Marin is the director of Annecy Festival. Is that correct? Okay, got it all right. Please welcome these amazing people. So I wanted to ask each of you to talk about what propelled your festival to sign the pledge. What was the decision behind it? Is it a decision you made? Is it a decision that you had to talk to your board about? Just kind of like the process a little bit, intellectually, and also kind of like the mechanism to start it. So, Ora, why don't you give us a start?
First, I'm so happy to be here, so happy to have signed, and would like to thank everyone who took part in this, the 50-50 2020 Collectif in particular, and everybody else working on the subject. We at IDFA signed, I think, within 6 hours from being invited to sign, which was, I think, the kind of the documentary people approach to this, that we just said, yeah, we have. IDFA is a team-based operation, so it was actually happened in the same day of a meeting, and we said, anyone has a problem with this, and we all said, no, let's sign it, and we signed it. So why did we do that? Because you could always say that we can do this without having to sign.
Right.
But I think signing is, in a way, an announcement of being part of a movement,
Right.
rather than just only doing it, which is, of course, the core of the objective of this. So it's, I think, kind of a statement that we are together on this, that we want to be part of an international wave trying to think together, not only to achieve 50-50 2020, it's also to discuss how we do that,
Right.
because it's not obvious. It's something to really think about all the time and discuss.
Right.
So to be part.
Yep. I appreciate that. Joanna?
Hi. So Cameron Bailey signed the pledge last year at the festival, and it was a big day. We had the rally, and it's something that, so I was already appointed for the job, but I hadn't started. I started 6 months ago, but I know this is something that a lot of the board members, and we have 42% of women on our board, are very passionate about it. So, about this. Some of them are here. And we had started this program, this initiative called Share Your Journey, the year before in 2017. So this is something that I think the festival, and obviously Cameron is very passionate about it. He has been a huge supporter of women filmmakers. And he got the Leading Man Award from Melissa at the Athena Film Festival. So
Maybe one of you will get it next. Mariette.
Well, I have a similar situation. The pledge was signed by Dieter Koslik, who actually at the moment is still the managing director of the Berlinale. His contract only expires on May 31st. But of course, he communicated with me and with Carlo Chatrian that he wants to sign this pledge. I think the idea was brought forward by the Berlinale team also, who are very, very aware of this issue and who feel it's very important to make a statement and to express where our position, to make clear that we identify with the issue very much. There was no need for us to talk to the board of directors. We were able to decide this on our own, like managing directors. Mm-hmm. And I think actually the Berlinale is such a... The festival is very open, so I think it already has a very large part of women in every part of the festival, not only as a directors, but also working in different other functions.
Great. So I didn't take it back to the board, but I did talk to other people within my organisation. The London Film Festival is run by the British Film Institute, which is a very large, multifaceted organisation. We have a production team who invest in UK film through the lottery, and they actually, we do have a 50-50 target in terms of production. So it was already a conversation that we were having as an organisation. As a festival, we don't have quotas, and we can talk about that a little bit more, about what that means, but it's in the DNA of the festival that we're always looking for new voices, and we're always really mindful about who's made the films. And last year we had, before we signed, we had 38% female directors in the festival. So it's something very dear to our hearts, but also it is something that I needed to talk about as an organisation. And we decided to sign the pledge for solidarity and also transparency, so we could talk a little bit about who makes the cultural decisions at the organisation. The BFI is just by coincidence because we value diversity. There's 50% of the organization is female, 50% male. Same with the festival team, and that was done without quotas. That was done very instinctively.
Yes, so for Annecy, we have to say that we signed just right after Cannes, because Annecy is it's organized in June, every year in June, and in 2015 we have decided to have a complete edition dedicated to women in animation. So in 2015, all the jury's members were women. The official poster was made by a woman. We had a lot of special programming around animation movies made by women. So the signature was more another step of the process that we began in 2015. So when the association proposed it to us, it was, yes, of course, let's do it and let's see what we can improve.
So you all talked a little bit about how you just decided to sign this, but also I want you to talk a little bit about what does it mean to the rest of the film industry to be leaders on this. I would say that most people are understanding that this is an important issue, and it's just not, women, it's people of color, and so how we make the film industry reflective of the world that we're all living in. So talk a little bit about, I always really like to talk to heads of festivals to talk about like leadership philosophies, because people take their leads from the leader. Well, that's not the great sophisticated way of saying that, but if you could talk a little bit about being a leader and leading on this issue, gender and race. Some of you are women, but particularly for the men, like how do you talk about inclusion and diversity with your teams in order to get everybody on board, moving it forward? Does that make sense?
It does.
And the
but
women too.
It does, but it's a very difficult question, I must say. Very difficult to define or to really put your hands on the process. I think in principle it is what getting to 50-50 or to gender parity or to geographical inclusivity or pluralism, whatever we'd like to call it, is a serious day-to-day commitment. So there is a default mode that everything falls back to. The default mode maybe relies on industry standards, market standards, established names, track record of box office, whatever it is that makes our perception of what is a film to celebrate or to wait for in the more mainstream, well-established over the decades approach. And this means that whenever the director forgets about it, unless someone on the team is really awake and ready to keep tracking the presence and the inclusivity of a program, it will fall back to this default mode. So in IDFA, for example, I can say that IDFA, of course, before I came on board, was had a female director and founder for 30 years. So it has a tradition of being female-led as an organization. But still, I think we got in 2013, when the focus of the festival, of the edition, was women in documentary film, we got to 42% films in the festival made by women. That was the year with a big focus. Now, the average always been between 35 and 40, like going up and down. What we achieved last year, for example, because we managed to work on this every day, we managed to keep challenging our own decision process, was just not too good, must say, but is a step, was just to be on the same percentage of submitted films by women, which was 41%. So this was 2018, and we see what can we achieve in the coming 2 years. It's a process. I think the responsibility here is basically to be alert to this commitment in every little detail, and to, I think that the element, the point in the pledge about our own organizational structure, the percentage of women in our own structure, which I think is also about being an international team, not only in gender, but also in different geographical and cultural backgrounds, is the other key that I hope, I believe, but hope time will prove that this is how we strategically address this issue, rather than just keeping track of the exact quotas or percentages, but rather make it a systematic, organic process.
Did anyone please add?
Yes. So, while the festival is obviously a great platform to showcase more work for women, there is a systemic problem in terms of there are less women submitting films. So how do we address that? TIFF has a program with Share Our Journey where we're helping women kind of develop and accelerate their careers, giving them opportunities. But at the end of the day, I think it's the film funds and the studios and the people financing that need to take those risks, because that's where change needs to happen. I think as festivals, we can move the needle, we can call attention for amazing women filmmakers, but at the end of the day, we need people to be there at the beginning when these films are being made.
No, I think I'd really concur with that. I think that's hugely important. It was interesting, just as a fact, a statistic, in the festival last year when we had 38% female directors, 50% of our short films were female directed, but then you look at the gala films, which tend to be, red carpet, major award season titles, and we only had one film in the headline galas from a female director, and that's really, and it's not for lack of sort of wanting those films, and it's just that you have the fiscal cliff. So short films, it's exciting to see how many short filmmakers are being invested in, but there need to be women who are given the opportunity to make films at the top end of the budget, or even the medium end of the budget spectrum, and I think that needs to happen really urgently.
Yes.
And just to add, it's not only about female directors, but also other team participants, like either editors, DOPs, whatever. And I must say that I was a little bit ashamed that it took me some time to realize how many female DOPs work in Germany when I did some research last year for a retrospective the MoMA was showing. And you see that there are a lot of women working as a DOP, and they do very different kind of work, and you never realize this. So I think a lot of things need to be more sharpened in the perception, that you are more aware of what's happening. And I think this kind of pledge helps us to be more aware of these elements.
Yeah, I think we were talking about women directors so much because it is the leadership position. And once we have created a kind of dialogue that we can all communicate about the lack of opportunities for women, then we can filter down into the other positions. And I think one of the things I wanted to bring up to you all is, how do we move it beyond just kind of gender, the conversation, to more inclusion? Because I know that one of the struggles that Delphine and I had on a regular basis were that there are laws in certain countries where you can't ask anything related to people's race or ethnicity. And I found out when I started working on talk to the people at Film Freeway, which is how a lot of people submit films, at least in the US, that there is no requirement for either gender or race in any, there's no kind of even two questions that you have to accept for your name. So I was wondering if you all, who get festivals through portals and different things like that, how do we broaden this conversation to not just be talking only all about women?
So we added to the form the cultural heritage, sexual preference, and obviously gender. But that doesn't mean, then we're counting those, but it's optional, of course. And actually, we were all at lunch, and we were talking, and John Cooper was asking, who is opting not to answer? Is it more women, more men? But I think at the end of the day, it's people who, it's all about privacy, and they want to keep that. So it's hard to get the data.
No, I was going to just say that it's obviously, this was one of the things that when we were signing the pledge that I really thought about a lot, and conversations around diversity in terms of ethnicity and culture can be quite sort of, you know, the transatlantic and European conversation is a very, very different one than the one that you have sort of globally and internationally for, you know, very specific cultural reasons. But we always think, and again, it goes back to decision making when you're making cultural decisions. And it's like, if you're interested in diverse perspectives, you want to hear from different countries in the world, then every time you make a decision, you think, who's telling the story, who's made the film, what country is it from? And that, I think we would all, I know everyone's festivals here, and global diversity is hugely important to everyone. So it's about making sure that there's broad cultural representation.
As Berlin is a very open city, the Berlinale also has someone who is in charge of diversity, of making sure that the information necessary is available and that people are aware of this issue very much. And I think that helps already quite a bit. So I always think it's very much about awareness and about being more sensitive for certain issues. But I think it's definitely very important, more diversity.
To me, this is a very sensitive issue. First, yes, I am very uncertain that we should ask for ethnicity. Put aside the EU regulations that do not make that clear cut at all. But I do find it problematic to organize people by their color. I do find it understandable in some context, but that's, I think, more the exception than the rule. I do feel offended when somebody puts me in the colored box or doesn't put me in the colored box. I feel annoyed both ways, and I feel othered. So I think this is a very important point that is honestly a very white point. How can we ask you what's your color and put you, and then do our, in a way, relieve our own guilt about your including you or not. And I think it's not the point, because also we all work directly hands-on in this community of filmmakers everywhere. So to me, this is a question of investment. It's not only a question of going through the huge pile of submissions. It's the investment in where do we put our annual travel budget, where do we go as teams of festivals, who do we meet, how do we open our other elements of our programs. In IDFA, for example, like many other festivals, it's an ecosystem. It's not just a showcase of films. There's also the fund, there's also the forum for co-financing, there's also the film market, there's also the training initiatives, the talent development programs. And I think here also is the effort to be fully open, because this is the investment in the future. Now, just one last point about this. I'm also very, very happy, and it's very helpful what's happening with the question of gender parity, because it otherwise was always very difficult to explain the problem with understanding cinema from the South. It was very common. It's now generally, we all agree that nobody can say, well, what can we do? Women don't make good films. We all agree now that this is not something that is acceptable for anyone to say. But you know that it's still being said every day about Africa. Well, what can we do? No good films come out of Africa. And I think it's at least now clear on the gender question, so that I can use it as a clarification example to say, can you say it about female filmmakers? And then we start the discussion again, and we see, can we invest in reaching out to filmmakers in Africa? So it's an active role that I assume we need to be playing, not just waiting until films arrive to our database with a link and watch it or not and see what's the color of the face of the filmmaker.
Thank you. Thank you for saying that. So for other festivals, talk a little bit about the biggest challenges your festival faces. I mean, I always like these conversations to be forward-thinking, right? You know, it sucked before, it still sucks now, it's not gonna suck as bad tomorrow, and et cetera, but having these be substantive conversations and not just like window dressing, helps other people come up with solutions. So what are some of the biggest challenges that you face in getting your inclusion to the next level? Any of you?
I think a lot has been mentioned already, that it depends also on the films which are produced. So it's not only, you cannot influence which films are made with female directors or female teams. So you are the end of the chain. And the other thing is that it's not only about gender, but about very many different
I
aspects.
want to interrupt a little bit on
sure.
this end of the chain thing, because yes, the movies are already made, but also it seems like this is the first place where people, like festivals, or places where people can actually get the money to make their films or show so they're also the beginning of the line in some respects. So I want to figure out a better way to say it, because people use that a lot in terms of how they don't include folks. So I was just wanted to put that out there and make people, maybe have a little bit of a conversation. I know you program movies, but your ecosystems, and it's not just what's on screen, it's everything.
So
Does that make sense?
That makes sense. And because, yes, a lot of filmmakers, and especially women filmmakers, in this case, are discovered at festivals. So we have our lead programmer for Discovery, for the Discovery section this year, is a woman, Dorota. So we're very happy about that, and we hope that will influence how she programs. The other thing that we've been working on is on the media inclusivity, because it's also about how people and who is talking about the films that are being shown at the festivals. So we started that initiative last year. So we got a lot of new journalists from unrepresented parts to come into Toronto. And this year we're adding to that program some mentorship, so that more established critics and journalists can mentor younger people coming in, because the conversation is also who is criticizing, who's talking about the films that are shown.
Right. Anyone else want to add?
No, I would say the same is true at our festival. We have a number of mentorship programs that we run, and one of them last year was for new critics, because we are seeing exactly the same thing, that sort of the diversity of the sort of critical circuit, or people getting the work, was really disappointing. And last year we had 6 critics, and all of the, most of the writers have gone on to work for publications in the UK, which is really lovely to see them continue to publish work. And they're writing, in the same way we all want to have diverse teams who are making decisions about films, you do see personal bias come into what journalists are deciding to cover and champion, and particularly around discovery, finding new voices. In the more diverse critical ecosystem we have, the more diverse that's going to be, that conversation around films and new discoveries and who's the new filmmaker to watch.
Yeah. I wanted to ask you a question about the difference between curation, because you probably all curate, versus submissions. So how does submissions come in versus how much is curated? Because that has always been one of the challenges that I think, in terms of the data that we're getting. If you get, 26% of your films submitted are by women, are they all looked at, or all those kind of different questions. And I think it varies from festival to festival, but I'd love for you all to talk about that.
Yes, so in Annecy, when we signed the pledge, one point that we have to improve, it was the selection, because the selection in the past in Annecy, so before 2013, we had different selection committee coming from all over the world. So, and within the different categories. So sometimes we had in a team 2 girls, 1 man, sometimes 2 men, 1 girl. But the selection was not made by Annecy directly, by committee that we create every year in the different categories. In 2013, we decided to make the selection, to sign the selection, and the film department team was only with men. So we began with this team, and one of when we signed the pledge, for me as a new CEO, because I took my position last July, it was the really occasion to change it directly. So we welcome in our team 3 women in order to make it complete parity. And now what we observe is that, for example, for short film, we received around 40% movies directed or co-directed by women, and we selected around 40% in the selection. The main problem, and the figures are very good for shorts. The figures are even better for a student movie because it's this year we will have a 61% of student movie will directed by or co-directed by women. The problem is that with feature film we received 11%, and at the end we select 6%. But it's what we received, and that's the main problem. But what we observe is that with more parity, at the end, you have better. I don't know how it works, but you have better figures. And yeah.
So let me ask you. So all the movies that you select for your festival come through a portal. People send them in to you. Everything is sent in to you. So you're saying that not enough women are submitting to, and yours is an animation festival, right? Do you think part of it is the stigma, like are there less women doing animation? Or, well, no, I'm not gonna say that, because I know that's not true. But like, is it prohibitively expensive? Do you give, I'm just really trying to kind of probe that a little bit.
It's a very difficult question. You have a lot of women directors for shorts. You have now we receive a lot of students in Annecy. This year we received 3,000 animation students. You have now in 10 years, you have now 60% of students are women coming to Annecy. So when you see that figures, you can believe that in the future you have results and you have movies made by women. And it's okay for the short, it's okay for the student movie, but you have problem with the TV program and for the feature film program. And why? It's really difficult to say. I don't know. It's maybe it's because it's in France. It's not it's not the studio that It's more independent process with a director, with a creator. So for me, it's really difficult to understand why it's a problem. There is a problem, but I think that we are in a process. So, and this year you can see we have some very good animation movie. One is the Swallows of Kabul. It's co-directed by 2 women. So, I think it's changing now.
Can you talk a little bit about how you kind of curate versus submit?
Well, it depends on what do you mean by curate? Go to other film festivals and select works from there.
That's part of it, and then studios send you movies, and I mean you have different threads you program in, but it's also just trying to understand, like, if somebody submits a movie through a portal to your festival, does it get seen by people?
Open submissions. Yeah, absolutely. Every single thing that comes in is seen by the team. We have a team of open submissions viewers that's about 5 people, very mixed culturally and in terms of gender. They first view works completely and then put forward films to be second viewed by the internal programming team. So that's the way it works. I'd say in terms of numbers of female and male submissions, I don't know the answer to that because we haven't been tracking that for a long time, so I'm not sure what the percentages are. We started last year for the first time, and we might have actually sent you these figures, Melissa, but the team, so the way that the selection process, invariably loads of the open submissions that come in, our short film programs get programmed. It's probably between 50 and 60% of the films that, if not higher, that come in via open submissions are the ones that get programmed in the festival. And as you go up through different sections, it's fewer open submissions and more curated. But that's one of the most exciting parts of the festival is the discovery element of open submissions. So be surprised if any festivals don't want to to view that, because that's where you find new voices.
Yeah, I mean, I read sometimes about people who submit their movies and they are 100% sure no one has ever watched them and they're just taking the money. And so it's also, it's people who tick boxes on these submission things and they're send it. But, is it worth it for them to send it? So some of those questions, and I think understanding the difference between curation and submission is an important thing for filmmakers, especially younger ones emerging filmmakers, not by age though.
Yeah, I think at the Berlinale it works both ways. Some of the programmers track down projects and track down filmmakers and follow them, but there's also an open call for submissions. And I can assure you that all films are seen, maybe not by a lead programmer, but by a scout, someone doing the pre-selection work. In 2019, 37% of the films were made by women. 32% of films made by women were submitted. So there were more films chosen made by women than in percentage. I think that's a good one. Maybe it's also due to the fact that the head of Generation is a woman, Marion Redpath. The head of the Perspectives German cinema is a woman. There is a lot of female potential at the Berlinale. The co-production market, there are 2 women, which is maybe the earlier stage of projects coming together. So I think the Berlinale has a very good equilibrium there.
Great.
So, yes, if it's a combination of there are the films that are submitted through the portal and then the ones that are tracked by the programmers. So that's why we don't have all of the data, but every film gets seen, absolutely. And then I would just say something, just because I think you mentioned or someone mentioned it before, we are tracking directors, but I really think, and maybe it's because I'm a former producer, I really think producers play an incredible, important role in not only hiring female directors, but also hiring females in key creative positions. So I really also would like to see that in the conversation, because films that are produced by women are more likely to have better representation than not.
Absolutely,
so,
absolutely.
I think it's a very big logistical issue for all festivals.
Yeah.
I think. I mean, watching the submissions, to us, it's basically whether we are tracking the filmmaker and their project or not. It will all go to the same database, and we will be checking the films. And if every submission is seen, but then what the pledge does is that when one section of the festival, one competition, is failing on the first draft program, failing to be balanced, what happens is that we go back to our database and see the next list of films we didn't pick yet, which were made by female filmmakers, but got just a little under the final grade of selection, and then they get seen again by another programmer, and then it's discussed. So in this sense, the pledge is helping push our logistic challenge, pushing us to challenge ourselves, which is really not easy with the thousands of films. There's an inflation in films and in festivals also. So the amount of work to be really pledging that every film is seen by a few people and discussed is becoming a bit of a kind of fantasy. Yeah. But we do our best, and the pledge is helping a lot in this. Then I think curated, I want to comment on this to say it matters a lot, because the position of women in the film world is not only about female filmmakers' films in competitions. So there are also the curated programs. There is also, in IDFA, for example, and I think every festival had a different way, different vocabulary, different way of approaching this. In IDFA, we have a section called Masters. Mm-hmm. That's where you would watch the new films by great masters of this art. And masters who are established and recognized around the world as masters are vast majority male. And here comes, I think, our responsibility to recognize and reintroduce and introduce the female masters of this art in the right positioning as masters, rather than continue in the same line of saying, who is the master? It's only these people. No, we have to acknowledge new ones. We have to. This is the role of curation to me, and it's very it's qualitative, not only quantitative.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. Disrupting the language that we're all so used to, also changing our mindset. So I commend you all on your work. This is hard. This is not, a very easy thing to do, and I appreciate that, and I know everyone in here appreciates all the hard work that you are doing to make sure your festivals are more inclusive. Okay, good.